In my last series of videos, I addressed Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People and its cultural impact, outlining how, for instance, it helped to normalize lying and manipulating others for monetary gain. Moving on somewhat, the next book I want to examine is Susan Cain's Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. Cain's main purpose for this book is to outline how introversion, despite the current culture's one-size-fits-all fixation on extroversion, has value. However, the work is also, roughly speaking, a self-help manual. This is quite ironic, as we shall see, as the book also highlights, in terms of cultural history, the problems with the self-help industry. Indeed, the very first page offers a manifesto for introverts, with white letters printed on a bright red background. Before the reader can even reach the front matter, this manifesto presents points such as the following. 1. There's a word for people who are in their heads too much. Thinkers. 2. Solitude is a catalyst for innovation. 7. It's okay to cross the street to avoid making small talk. 8. Quiet leadership is not an oxymoron. But in short, Cain confronts what she dubs the extrovert ideal, the idea that in order to be successful in our corporate, centralized world, you must be an extrovert. And as with any psychologically leaning bestseller or self-help stylized manual, the work can be quite insufferable. Nevertheless, Cain offers many valid points, perhaps chiefly with her overview of how we, as a society, got here, with extroversion valued to the point that introversion, or even just being quiet, is pathologized. And where does Cain start with this cultural history? She starts with Dale Carnegie. In narrative style, she relates Carnegie's biography, how the insecure son of poor farmers was able to take his fascination with public speaking and, as she describes, after a few grueling years of being a salesman, in actuality closer only to 3 years, succeeded on the path from rags to riches by becoming a public speaking teacher and by ultimately founding the Dale Carnegie Institute. However, taking Carnegie, his story, and his writings to move beyond them, Cain writes, Carnegie's metamorphosis from farm boy to salesman to public speaking icon is also the story of the rise of the extrovert ideal. Carnegie's journey reflected a cultural evolution that reached a tipping point around the turn of the century, changing forever who we are and whom we admire, how we act at job interviews and what we look for in an employee, how we court our mates and raise our children. America had shifted from what the influential historian Warren Sussman called a culture of character to a culture of personality, and opened up a Pandora's box of personal anxieties from which we would never quite recover. In the culture of character, the ideal self was serious, disciplined, and honorable. What counted was not so much the impression one made in public as how one behaved in private. The word personality didn't exist in English until the 18th century, and the idea of having a good personality was not widespread until the 20th. But when they embraced the culture of personality, Americans started to focus on how others perceived them. They became captivated by people who were bold and entertaining. The social role demanded of all in the new culture of personality was that of a performer. Sussman famously wrote, "Every American was to become a performing self." Here Cain highlights how the America of old, characterized by towns and rural farms, became increasingly defined by urbanization and corporatization, especially in the 20th century, with the rise of big businesses like Ford, Penney, Woolworth, and Sears Roebuck, citing the following statistics, which, if accurate, tell a drastic story. In 1790, only 3% of Americans lived in cities. In 1840, only 8% did. By 1920, more than a third of the country were urbanites. Cain also points to the self-help industry as a clear reason behind the shift from a society which valued character to a society which has since celebrated personality. As she notes, again citing cultural historian Warren Sussman, the old advice manuals, written prior to the 20th century, emphasized living a moral and noble life, a life focused on inner virtue, pointing the reader to characteristics such as citizenship, duty, work, golden deeds, honor, reputation, morals, manners, and integrity. In contrast, the new self-help industry, which has only continued to grow in the last 100 years, encouraged its readers to concentrate on creating outer charm, forming a personality, or, to reference Carnegie, making people like you, prioritizing being magnetic, fascinating, stunning, attractive, glowing, dominant, forceful, and energetic. According to Cain, advertisers also joined in on this cultural shift. While early print ads were straightforward product announcements, Eaton's Highland Linen, the freshest and cleanest writing paper, the new personality-driven ads cast consumers as performers with stage fright from which only the advertiser's product might rescue them. These ads focused obsessively on the hostile glare of the public spotlight. All around you people are judging you silently, warned a 1922 ad for Woodbury's soap. Critical eyes are sizing you up right now, advised the Williams Shaving Cream Company. Madison Avenue spoke directly to the anxieties of male salesmen and middle managers. In one ad for Dr. West's toothbrushes, a prosperous-looking fellow sat behind a desk, his arm cocked confidently behind his hip, asking whether you've ever tried selling yourself to you. A favorable first impression is the greatest single factor in business or social success. The Williams Shaving Cream ad featured a slick-haired, mustachioed man, urging readers to let your face reflect confidence, not worry. It's the look of you by which you are judged most often. Soap and laundry detergent advertisements also targeted women in a similar vein, especially preying on their ability to form relationships and be socially successful. As an aside, to reference other works, this analysis falls directly in line with the 2002 Adam Curtis TV documentary series, The Century of the Self, which explores the various ways in which governments, global organizations, and corporations have used Freud and his successors' theories to control the masses, or convince them to buy products they might otherwise turn down. It especially highlights the work of Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, Freud's own nephew.
What led you, more than 60 years ago, to see the need for public relations?
And again, to turn to self-help, Carnegie, in his book How to Win Friends and Influence People, references Freud both directly and indirectly. Using psychological techniques on people to get what you want is a recurring theme. But Cain also highlights how psychologists were even more directly implicated in such cultural shifts. But nowhere was the need to appear self-assured more apparent than in a new concept in psychology called the inferiority complex. The IC, as it became known in the popular press, was developed in the 1920s by a Viennese psychologist named Alfred Adler to describe feelings of inadequacy and their consequences. "Do you feel insecure?" inquired the cover of Adler's best-selling book, Understanding Human Nature. "Are you faint-hearted? Are you submissive?" Adler explained that all infants and small children feel inferior, living as they do in a world of adults and older siblings. In the normal process of growing up, they learn to direct these feelings into pursuing their goals. But if things go awry as they mature, they might be saddled with a dreaded IC, a grave liability in an increasingly competitive society. And the following should sound quite familiar and comparable to the world of today, as Cain continues. The idea of wrapping their social anxieties in the neat package of a psychological complex appealed to many Americans. The inferiority complex became an all-purpose explanation for problems in many areas of life, ranging from love to parenting to career. In 1924, Collier's, a general interest magazine, ran a story about a woman who was afraid to marry the man she loved for fear that he had an IC and would never amount to anything. Another popular magazine ran an article called Your Child and That Fashionable Complex, explaining to moms what could cause an IC in kids and how to prevent or cure one. Everyone had an IC, it seemed. To some it was, paradoxically enough, a mark of distinction. The difference today is that it is not a small number of people who potentially see such labels as a mark of distinction. People love their mental health industry diagnoses, however reductionistic. Turning back to the idea that we live in a relatively new culture of personality, people hold on to these labels as the key to their very identity. But the greater implication of the transition that is highlighted here lies in the textual analysis of the old advice manuals and the words once used to define the ideals we should strive for. As a society, we have been convinced that the likes of honor and integrity are at best secondary in value. Thus, we can easily justify not only putting up false personalities or total facades, but we can also defend manipulating and controlling others. Here we can also see why the likes of Carnegie would so proudly offer examples, like I have cited before, such as my personal favorite of a Joseph S. Webb of the Philadelphia Electric Company. Accompanied by the district representative, this Webb approached an old Pennsylvania Dutch farm woman with the intent of selling her electricity. Upon seeing the woman's distrust, he offered the following blatant lie to buy time, to see what weaknesses he might find to prey on. "I'm just here to buy eggs." At one point in time, it seems like it might have mattered how you treated people in your own society. And it was not just about personal gain. That is long gone. But what matters to Susan Cain, however, is how our new culture has demonized the introvert. Again, it is all about what she labels the extrovert ideal. More on that next time. I hope to see you there.